His lawyer leaned forward and whispered 5 words. Just 5. I didn't hear them. I didn't need to, because the effect was immediate. Adrian Cole's face, that smug, self-satisfied face I had stared at across the breakfast table for 15 years, drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. The confidence vanished first, then the arrogance, then the certainty. His jaw tightened, his lips parted slightly, and his hands, the same steady hands that had signed multi-million-dollar property deals without hesitation, began to tremble. The papers he'd been so eager to finalize shook between his fingers, like leaves caught in a storm. And me? For the first time in 3 years. I smiled, not a big smile, not dramatic, just a small, controlled, knowing one. But I'm getting ahead of myself to understand that moment, to understand why his lawyer's whisper mattered. You need to understand how we got there. How a woman everyone believed had been blindsided, outplayed, discarded, was actually the only person in the room who knew exactly what was happening. My name is Natalie Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Adrian Cole. 15 years. 15 years of marriage. That's longer than most celebrity relationships survive, longer than most tech startups, longer than some governments, and definitely longer than my tolerance for disrespect should have lasted. But I'm stubborn. I always have been. My grandmother used to say stubborn women survive longer. I used to think she meant emotionally. Turns out she meant strategically. I met Adrian when I was 17. I'd graduated high school early, not because I was brilliant, not because I was gifted, because I was determined and desperate. Desperate to get out of my parents' house. Desperate to build something that belonged to me. I got a job at Carter and Bell Legal Associates as a file clerk. Minimum wage, maximum paper cuts, long hours in a back room organizing other people's legal problems. But it was mine. It was freedom. By 18, I had worked my way up to legal assistant. I learned quickly. I paid attention. I watched how attorneys built cases, how contracts were structured, how loopholes were hidden inside paragraphs most people never read. I became very good with details, very good with numbers, and very good at observing without being noticed. Adrian was 24 when we met. We were introduced at a client networking event hosted by the firm. He wasn't rich yet, not even close, but he acted like he already was. Charming, confident, ambitious. He talked about building a real estate empire like it was inevitable, like success wasn't a possibility. It was a delayed appointment. He had plans, big ones, luxury developments, commercial plazas, investment portfolios. He spoke about the future like it belonged to him, and I listened. He told me he was going to build something incredible. I told him I'd help him file the paperwork. That was our version of flirting. We got married when I was 19. Most people said we were too young, but youth makes ambition feel romantic. Ethan was born when I was 20. I continued working part-time at the law firm while raising him. I built my retirement account slowly, quietly, consistently. My grandmother always said, a woman should have her own money, not secret money. She was very clear about that. Just her own. Something no one could threaten to take. Something that meant choice. At 23, Adrian's first major property deal succeeded. Then another, and another. Momentum is addictive, and success changes people. He asked me to leave the firm and join him full-time. I need someone I can trust, he said. So I stepped in. I handled the books, managed vendor contracts, coordinated contractors, oversaw payroll, communicated with investors, scheduled inspections, staged model homes, organized launch events, answered emails at midnight, balanced spreadsheets at 2 a.m., all unpaid, because I was building our future, because we were a team, because marriage means sacrifice. I did all of it while raising Ethan, while managing our household, while making sure Adrian never missed a meeting, never forgot an appointment, never had to think about anything that didn't directly grow his empire. My official title? Wife. My real job? chief operating officer without the salary. For 11 years, I poured myself into his dream, and for 11 years, he collected the applause. At industry galas, I was introduced as Adrian's supportive wife. At award ceremonies, he thanked his mentors, his staff, his drive, his strategy. He thanked everyone, except me. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. We knew the truth. But slowly, subtly, something shifted. He stopped asking for my input, stopped reviewing decisions with me, stopped seeing me as a partner. Late nights at the office became routine. Business trips extended an extra day. He started criticizing small things, the way I dressed, the meals I cooked, my lack of ambition. Lack of ambition. I was running his entire back-end operation without pay, while raising his son and managing his life. But yes, apparently, I lacked ambition. Then came the Tuesday. 3 months ago, I was making dinner, his favorite, lemon herb chicken, garlic potatoes, the works. Because even when appreciation fades, habit doesn't. He walked in, loosened his tie, and sat down at the kitchen table. His face wasn't sad, wasn't conflicted, wasn't guilty. It was calm, corporate, transactional. "I want a divorce," he said. Just like that. No build-up, no explanation. And then, "I want the house, the cars, the business, everything. You can keep Ethan." He said it the way someone customizes an order. "I'll take the assets, hold the child," like our 15-year-old son was an optional add-on. Like Ethan was an inconvenience he was generously allowing me to keep. I remember staring at him, not crying, not yelling, just staring. 15 years, reduced to a bullet point list of assets. At our kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish, like I was a vendor contract being terminated. What I didn't know that night was that this wasn't impulsive. It was premeditated. Adrian had already hired an attorney, Mitchell Harper. Expensive, aggressive, known for dismantling spouses who didn't contribute financially. He had drafted proposals, prepared asset protection strategies, moved funds, structured ownership. While I was grocery shopping, while I was scheduling dentist appointments, while I was believing we were partners. The next day, his mother arrived, Diane Cole, perfectly styled hair, perfectly rehearsed sympathy. She patted my hand and told me I should have worked harder to keep him satisfied. "Men have needs, dear," she said softly, like she was explaining something complicated to someone slow. I almost laughed. Her husband had practically lived on a golf course for 20 years to avoid being home. But yes, I was clearly the failure. That first week passed in a blur. Adrian moved my things into the guest room. Draft agreements were emailed. Timelines were scheduled. Meetings arranged. He operated with efficiency. Like this was a merger. Everyone looked at me with pity. The discarded wife. The woman who didn't see it coming. The victim. But here's what no one knew. 3 years earlier, while reviewing company financial statements, I found something, a discrepancy. Then another, and another, a pattern, hidden transfers, off-book allocations, documents that didn't align, something Adrian believed was buried permanently. I didn't confront him. I didn't panic. I didn't react. I started preparing, quietly, carefully, patiently. For 3 years I watched, collected, copied, documented, while he thought he was untouchable, while he believed I was naive, while he planned his exit. I was building something far more powerful, and when his lawyer leaned in and whispered those 5 words, it wasn't fear I felt, it was timing. My closet shrank overnight. What used to be a walk-in space filled with memories of better days was reduced to 2 small, tightly packed sections of hanging clothes. Adrian had graciously allowed me to keep those. The message was painfully clear. This wasn't my house anymore, not in his eyes, not in his rules, not in the way he started moving through it like I was already gone. Within 2 weeks, He brought her in. Chloe Bennett, 27 years old, worked at his company. Of course she did. She had that perfect Instagram look that screams effortless wealth. Blonde highlights that probably cost more than my grocery budget. Perfect nails. Designer yoga pants that cost more than my weekly food expenses. She walked into my kitchen like she had already practiced living there in her head, like she was rehearsing her future. She wore my apron, my grandmother's apron, the one with the small faded floral stitching that my grandmother had given me when I first got married. And Chloe stood there blending smoothies in my blender like she owned it. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but she made amazing smoothies, so I guess that was supposed to make everything acceptable. Adrian started parading her around like a trophy he had just won. They would sit on my couch, watch my television, eat off my plates. He would put his arm around her in front of me like I had already disappeared, like I was furniture, like I was background decoration in the life I had built. The humiliation didn't stay static. It grew. It escalated every single day. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate finances," he said like he was being logical, reasonable, mature. Then he canceled the joint account. Then he suggested I should probably start looking for somewhere else to stay while we sorted things out. My own home. And I was being asked to leave it, as if loyalty had an expiration date, as if 15 years could be boxed up like old paperwork. His mother, Margaret Cole, came over to help me pack. And by help, I mean she went through my belongings like she was auditing my life. She decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes, fine. Family photos, some of them. My grandmother's recipe box made her pause. She held it in her hands like she was considering claiming it for herself. What I was not allowed to take. Any jewelry Adrian had bought me, any furniture I had picked out, anything that had financial value. Those were marital assets, she said, and Adrian was entitled to them. She packed my belongings into garbage bags, not boxes, garbage bags, like I was being taken out to the curb with broken appliances and spoiled food, like I had already become disposable. Through all of this, I had one person I thought I could trust. Diana Holloway. 20 years of friendship, high school, boyfriends, breakups, babies, career changes, life crises. She was the first person I called after Adrian announced the divorce. She was supportive, always checking on me, always asking how I was coping, always ready to listen while I cried on her shoulder with cheap wine from the corner store. She told me I deserved better. She told me Adrian was making a terrible mistake, but something felt wrong. Tiny details started stacking up. At first it was subtle. When I mentioned to Diana that I was thinking about fighting for the house, our son Tyler came home the next day and said, "Dad said that wouldn't work." I never told Adrian that. When I told Diana I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Adrian later made a comment about how that neighborhood was too expensive for me anyway. That was when it clicked. Looking back, I should have noticed it years earlier. The way Diana's face lit up when Adrian walked into a room, the way she laughed at his jokes a little too loudly, the way she always asked about him first. "How's Adrian? How's the business? Is Adrian happy?" She had been carrying a quiet obsession with my husband for 15 years, and Adrian collected admirers like some people collect luxury watches. He knew exactly how to use them. He probably told her things he didn't mean, hints, promises, suggestions that after the divorce maybe something could happen between them. Just enough hope to keep her loyal. My best friend was his spy. 20 years of friendship traded for attention and empty promises. At least she should have negotiated better. But the worst part wasn't Adrian. It wasn't Margaret. And it wasn't even Diana. The worst part was Tyler. My son saw everything. The girlfriend moving into his home, the grandmother packing his mother's belongings into garbage bags, the way his father looked at me like I was already irrelevant, and Adrian was working on him, slowly, quietly, dripping poison into his ear every day. Your mom is making this difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair, but she won't cooperate. Tyler started pulling away, not angry, just confused, quiet, distant. He didn't know who to believe, and Adrian was extremely convincing. I could lose the house. I could lose the money. I could lose everything I had spent 15 years building. But what hurt more than losing assets was watching my son look at me like I was the problem, like I was the obstacle to his father's happiness. That was the real wound, the one that bled slowly, the one that stayed open. The knife wasn't the divorce. It wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't even watching Adrian build a new life with someone else. The real knife was watching my son look at me like I was the problem, like I was the obstacle standing between him and his father's happiness. That was the wound that bled slowly, the one that didn't make dramatic scenes, just quiet pain. So I hired a lawyer, Nina Castellano, 52 years old, sharp as a razor blade, the type of lawyer who didn't waste words on comfort. She reviewed my situation calmly, methodically, like she was reviewing a military operation. You helped build this business, she said. You are legally and financially entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight. I sat across from her for a long moment. Then I asked the question that made her pause. What if I don't want to fight? Nina stared at me like I had started speaking another language, like I had suggested we send Adrian a thank you card and a fruit basket. She thought I was broken, depressed, emotionally defeated, too tired to stand up for myself. She had no idea. I moved into a small apartment with Tyler, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen smaller than my old pantry. Half our belongings didn't even fit inside. Boxes sat stacked in Tyler's bedroom corner like physical proof of how far we had fallen. Meanwhile, Adrian moved forward with his new life like he was starring in his own redemption story. He posted photos with Brittany Sawyer. New chapter, new energy, blessed. His mother, Margaret, commented underneath, "So proud of you, sweetheart. You deserve happiness." My sister called me furious. "You need a shark lawyer," she said. "Take him for everything he has." Everyone had advice. Everyone thought I was weak. Everyone saw a woman who had given up, a woman who was letting her husband walk all over her. Everyone was wrong. Because here's the truth about being underestimated. People stop watching you carefully. They stop protecting their secrets. They start talking freely. And that's when you learn everything. 3 years. That's how long I had been carrying my secret. 3 years of knowing the truth about Adrian Cole and his perfectly curated financial empire. It started on a random Tuesday night. 3 years before the divorce. Adrian was working late. Again. By then, I had stopped believing working late meant what he said it meant. I was going through company books, reconciling accounts, doing the boring, unglamorous work that actually kept his business alive. That was when I noticed something strange, a transfer to an account I didn't recognize, then another, then a pattern. Money was leaving our accounts and going into places I had never seen before. I stayed up until 3 a.m., coffee growing cold beside me, following transaction trails. What I found made my stomach turn. Adrian had been taking loans against everything we owned. The house, Our beautiful house that neighbors envied and visitors admired. 3 separate mortgages. Original mortgage, $400,000. Second mortgage, $350,000. Third mortgage, $350,000. Total debt on the house alone, $1.1 million. Market value of the house, about $850,000. We were already underwater by $250,000 on a property I thought we owned outright. The business was worse. Lines of credit maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes owed $85,000. Vendor debts $120,000. Equipment loans $75,000. The company Adrian bragged about at every social event was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. Even the cars weren't real assets. All 3 were leased, with balloon payments coming due. We didn't own anything. We just had expensive monthly obligations pretending to be wealth. I sat in my kitchen at 3 a.m., surrounded by printed financial statements, doing math that felt like watching our life collapse in slow motion. Total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Total real asset value, maybe $1.6 million. We were already $300,000 in the hole, maybe more. But the worst question was still unanswered. Where did the money go? I kept digging, week after week, transaction after transaction. The truth was devastating. Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000, completely lost. Gambling losses, $75,000 and gone. A secret apartment, rented for a woman I had never met. $60,000 in rent and furnishings, luxury purchases I was never part of. Watches, suits, vacations, private experiences, another $85,000. Adrian wasn't building an empire. He was building a fragile house of cards using borrowed money. We looked rich the way mannequins look alive. Perfect from a distance, completely hollow up close. My first instinct was to confront him, to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But I knew Adrian. He would twist it, gaslight me, make me feel crazy for questioning him. Worse, if he knew I knew, he might try to take control of my personal assets because I had something he didn't know about, my own financial independence. My grandmother's voice still lived inside my head. A woman should have her own money. Not secret money, just protected money. My IRA from my law firm years had grown to about $180,000. Separate property under the law. Then there was my grandmother's inheritance. She had died when I was 28. She left me $340,000. Her will was very clear. This money is for Natalie alone. I kept everything separate. No shared accounts. No commingling. No using it for household expenses. Just like my grandmother had done for 50 years. Not secret money, just mine. I had about $520,000 of completely protected assets. So I didn't confront Adrian. Instead, I prepared. I worked with my uncle, a retired accountant, to build an irrevocable trust for Tyler. My IRA, my inheritance, all transferred into that trust. My name wasn't even listed as beneficiary. Adrian's name definitely wasn't. It was for Tyler's future, college, first home, emergency safety, untouchable. Then I documented everything: mortgages, loans, contracts, accounts, meaning the person who didn't know he was financially drowning yet. Meanwhile, Brittany started redecorating my house. New furniture, new artwork, new decorations. Then she painted my kitchen, gray, cold, corporate gray. I spent 3 weeks choosing that sage green paint. 3 weeks of testing samples under different lighting. 3 weeks of trying to make that kitchen feel like hope. and she covered it in builder-grade gray paint like it was nothing. Gray like her personality. Gray like her future once she realized Adrian was broke. Very fitting. Diane kept calling me, fishing for information disguised as friendship. "How are you holding up?" she would ask softly. "I just want this to be over," I would answer. "I don't have the energy to fight anymore." I made my voice crack slightly. Perfect performance. Within hours, Adrian would relax. He thought Diane was loyal to him. She thought she was manipulating me. She was just acting as a free information courier, not a very valuable one either. But while the adults were playing emotional chess, Tyler was watching everything. My son was smarter than anyone gave him credit for. He noticed contradictions. He saw his father wearing a $15,000 watch while telling him they couldn't afford a school trip to Washington, D.C. He saw Brittany's shopping bags piling up in the foyer, but heard his father complain about money being tight. The disconnect didn't make sense to him. One evening, Tyler came to my tiny apartment. He sat across from me at my second-hand kitchen table. His eyes were serious, mature, too old for his age. "Honesty, Mom," he said quietly. "Is Dad actually rich?" I looked at my son for a long moment. "What do you think?" I asked. He thought carefully. "I think something is wrong." "I think he's pretending." I squeezed his hand. "Trust me," I said. "Just wait a little longer." My 15-year-old figured out the truth before 2 lawyers and a certified accountant did. I should probably charge his college fund for consulting services. Behind the scenes, Nina was building the legal weapon. The divorce agreement was structured carefully. I would surrender all claims to marital property, house, business, vehicles. Everything would go to Adrian. In exchange, I would receive my $50,000 settlement and walk away. But attached to the agreement was something far more dangerous. A liability disclosure addendum. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan tied to those assets. When Adrian signed for assets, he was legally accepting all liabilities. The mortgages would become his responsibility. The business debts would become his responsibility. The car leases would become his problem. It was all written in legal language. Beautiful, cold, devastating. Legal documents are poetry, Nina told me. Expensive poetry that can destroy lives. My favorite kind. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Adrian's lawyer, Harold Whitfield, requested a financial audit, just to verify asset values. He knew something felt wrong. He was a veteran attorney. He had seen this pattern before, but Adrian refused. "No audits," he said. "I built that company. I know what it's worth." He didn't want delay. He blamed Brittany. "She wants this done. I want this done." Harold tried again, still refused. So Harold did what good lawyers do. He made Adrian sign a waiver stating he had refused professional financial verification despite legal advice. Adrian signed without reading, because he was impatient, because he wanted to impress Brittany, because arrogance makes people skip fine print. That waiver would later destroy him. The night before the final hearing, he sent me a text. "Thank you for not making this ugly." I stared at that message for a long time. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his life, and he was thanking me for not making things difficult while he discarded me. I texted back, "I just want what's best for Tyler." What was best for Tyler was a secure trust fund. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp, final sound. "This marriage is dissolved." I stood slowly, smoothed my dress, picked up my purse. Then I looked at Adrian one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered around him. The empire he thought he had built was already starting to collapse in his mind. You said you wanted everything except Tyler, I said quietly. I gave you exactly what you asked for. Then I turned and walked out of that courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I could hear him, Adrian's voice rising, angry, desperate, yelling at his lawyer. How did this happen? How did you let this happen? Threatening lawsuits, accusing everyone except himself. Harold's voice remained calm. I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused. Through the glass doors, I saw Brittany's face change as she listened. The confidence was gone. She was finally seeing him, not as the successful businessman, but as a man standing at the edge of financial ruin. She was gone before I even reached the elevator, heels clicking fast across the marble floor. Not looking back. Her exit was faster than her entrance into my marriage. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside into the April sunlight. The sky was bright blue. The air felt warm, alive. Behind me, I could still hear my ex-husband screaming about fairness, fraud, and how none of this was his fault. Ahead of me was my future, smaller, simpler, but completely mine. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Brittany moved out of the house in the middle of the night. She left a note. This isn't what I signed up for. The gray kitchen sat empty, cold. Within 1 month, Adrian tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers, only banks calling about missed payments, only realtors suggesting short sales. Within 2 months, the business started collapsing. Vendors filed lawsuits. Credit lines were frozen. The company that Adrian had spent 15 years bragging about, the company I had spent 11 years quietly keeping alive, was starting to crumble into dust. Within 3 months, Adrian was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who once bragged about building an empire was now trying to figure out which personal assets he could protect. The answer? Almost none. Lorraine's perfect son was calling relatives asking for loans, showing up at family members' houses with excuses. Nobody knew about the debt, so they blamed me. Alexis must have hidden it. I was tricked, but the documents were very clear. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The gambling debts, the cryptocurrency losses, the secret apartment, every signature, every decision, his choices, not mine. I heard Lorraine's Christmas newsletter that year was very short. Adrian is exploring new opportunities. Translation? Debt restructuring opportunities. The emotional conflicts around me resolved themselves with strange poetic symmetry. Diane called me a week after the hearing. Her voice was shaking. I had no idea things were this bad. I'm so sorry, Alexis. I never meant to. I thought Vincent and I didn't answer, didn't respond, didn't give her the emotional closure she wanted. Some bridges are not meant to be rebuilt. Some friendships don't deserve second chances. 20 years of history destroyed for a man who only offered attention and empty promises. She called 3 more times. Then she stopped. I imagine she is still waiting for Adrian to notice her. She'll be waiting a long time. Lorraine tried a different strategy. She went through Tyler. Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I want to talk. Tyler looked at her, looked at the woman who had packed his mother's belongings into garbage bags, the woman who had called his mother worthless, the woman who had never questioned her son. Then Tyler said, Mom is busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses. Lorraine wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess which one of us got what we wanted? Tyler finally understood everything, not because I explained it, but because he observed it himself. He saw the court documents. He heard his father's excuses. He watched Brittany leave, watched Lorraine panic, watched the entire facade collapse. About a month after the divorce, Tyler came to my apartment. He sat at my small kitchen table, the sage green kitchen, second-hand furniture, unpacked boxes slowly becoming home. "You waited 3 years," he said quietly. "You knew this whole time." "I wanted to make sure you were protected," I told him. "I needed to know you would be safe. The trust fund, $520,000, untouchable, safe for his education, his future, his first home, his safety net." He was quiet for a long time. Then he hugged me, really hugged me, the kind of hug I hadn't gotten from my teenage son in months, the kind that meant understanding, the kind that meant pride. Most 15-year-old boys don't hug their mothers voluntarily. I knew I had done something right. My $50,000 settlement went toward rebuilding my life. First month's rent, security deposit, furniture that didn't fall apart when you sat on it. It wasn't luxury, but it was stability. Meanwhile, I enrolled in interior design classes at community college. The dream I had sacrificed when I was 23 to help build Adrian's empire was finally becoming mine again. I started small. My first client was a woman named Sandra. She was 52, ending a 28-year marriage. She stood in her empty apartment and asked, "How do you start over?" I thought about it, one room at a time, one color at a time, one day at a time. We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried. "Happy tears," she said, "the color of new beginnings." 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Adrian showed up at my apartment. I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, not healthy weight, dark circles under his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His watch was gone. He looked like a man who had survived a war and lost everything. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. "I didn't know it was this bad," he said. "I made mistakes. I know that now. But I didn't mean for this to happen." I leaned against my doorway and looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I had loved for half my life. The man who had thrown me away like I was disposable. The man now drowning in his own consequences. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Maybe we can figure something out." He couldn't even finish the sentence because he couldn't bring himself to ask for what he really wanted, help from me after everything. "You asked for everything except Tyler," I said calmly. "You got exactly what you wanted." "Alexis, please." "Goodbye, Vincent." I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 10 minutes. I know, because I watched through the peephole while eating ice cream. Best show I had ever seen. 5 stars. Would absolutely watch again. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, I sat in my small living room and looked at my grandmother's photo. The recipe box sat beside it. The one Lorraine almost took. The one thing that truly mattered. "You were right about everything, Grandma," I said quietly. "Keep your own money. Know your worth, and never let anyone make you feel small." The apartment was quiet, small, nothing like the house I had lived in for 15 years. But it was mine. Every paint color, every piece of furniture, every decision, mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free.